Before we begin today's episode, a brief content warning. Today we will be discussing the Season 7 episodes Signs and Wonders and Sein and Zeit. Signs and Wonders contains discussions of incest, sexual abuse, and animal cruelty. Sein and Zeit contains depictions of suicide and child death. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Things Are Getting Strange, Next Fast Rewatch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And I don't think we've got any news.
No, I think you're right. I don't think we have anything.
Except for your surprise one.
Oh, you mean that UFO we totally spotted?
Yes, or that satellite.
It was definitely an UFO.
Okay.
As discussed with you at the time, can you tell me what that object was?
Are you a satellite?
More than that?
I don't know the names of the individual satellites.
There we are. So it's an unidentified flying object.
It's kind of in orbit.
But it's unidentified. So it's an UFO.
I'll get the satellite tracker out and we'll figure out which one it was.
So yeah, we went out the other day because reportedly you could see the Aurora Borealis from our home. And we had a nice night of stargazing but didn't see any auroras. But we did see that UFO.
Yes. Any other news?
No, I don't have any news today. Do you?
No. No? No. I think. No. Well, in which case, shall we go to... I keep wanting to say Louisiana. Is it Louisiana? Tennessee. Shall we go to Tennessee? They have snakes. Lots of snakes.
I like snakes.
You like snakes? So that's good. We can stop at this church in the middle of nowhere where they do snake handling.
Sure, why not?
People die.
Sure, why not?
Fair enough. Signs and Wonders. Directed by Kim Manners, written by Jeffrey Bell, and first broadcast on the 23rd of January 2000. Guest stars. There's some varied people here.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got Randy Oglesby, who played Reverend Samuel Mackey. This is the snake one, I think.
No,
Is that the other one?
Enoch O'Connor was the snake handler.
Enoch O'Connor. Okay, so this guy then was in Candyman Farewell to the Flesh.
Okay.
Independence Day, Liar Liar, Nothing to Lose, Idle Hands.
Really?
Really? Argo, One Division, and Next Generation.
So, quite a lot then.
Quite a lot. But that's not all. We've also got Tracy Middendorf, who played Gracie.
Mm-hmm.
She was in Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
All right.
Mission Impossible 3, Deep Space Nine, Millennium, and House.
Oh, cool.
But that's not all. We've got Beth Grant, who is Iris Finster, who you know best as...
The Muffin Buffalo.
The Muffin Buffalo. She's also in The Wizard. You know, the Nintendo product placement of California. The one that's just an advert from Mario Brothers 3.
Yeah.
Flatliners. Is that Flatliners you're watching their father? Child's Play 2. Speed, which I'd forgotten about. City Slickers 2. A film... I've only seen the sequel. I've never seen the first one. The Dark Half. Donnie Darko, one of the big ones.
Oh, yeah.
Little Miss Sunshine. Southland Tales, because fortunately she's getting dragged through that career trajectory. No Country for Old Men. Rango.
Okay.
Willy's Wonderland. Maximum Bob. Malcolm in the Middle. Wonder Falls. Pushing Daisies. Dexter. Mockingbird Lane. American Gods. And a series of unfortunate events.
She is in a load of stuff.
She's done a lot of stuff. And last and kind of least is Eric Nenninger, who played Jared Chirp, who was in Malcolm in the Middle, Jeepers Creepers 2, and was a voice in LA Noire.
You haven't mentioned the guy who plays Enoch O'Connor. Do you want my random little bit of trivia about him now?
Go on, because he wasn't showing up on Wikipedia as a link.
His dad was actually a preacher who practiced snake handling.
Oh, wow. Keeping it in the family, though.
So yeah, he grew up as a child handling snakes, as his character does as a preacher in this episode.
Wow. No wonder he got cast for this.
So, do you have a synopsis for Signs and Wonders?
I do. In Blessing, Tennessee, Jared Chirp, while attempting to flee his home, is attacked by rattlesnakes inside his car and killed. Mulder and Scully confer with Reverend Mackey of the Blessing Community Church and investigate Reverend Enoch O'Connor, pastor of the fundamentalist snake-handling congregation of the Church of Signs and Wonders. He is the prime suspect. Later, a community church congregation member named Iris tells Reverend Mackey that she feels guilty because Jared called the night he died wanting to speak to his pregnant girlfriend Gracie, but she was already asleep, and Iris did not want to wake her. Later that night, Iris is then bitten by her staple remover when it turns into a snake. She promptly goes into the bathroom to clean the wound, but is killed when snakes appear everywhere in the bathroom. Mulder and Scully question Gracie and discover that she is O'Connor's daughter and was banished from the congregation and her home following her pregnancy. The agents return to O'Connor's church to search it. Scully is attacked by O'Connor, who thrusts her hands into a rattlesnake's cage but is stopped by Mulder. O'Connor is arrested and, while in a cell, attacked by dozens of snakes. He's taken to the hospital barely alive and is not given antivenom because Gracie insisted it would go against his religious beliefs. When she's alone with him in his hospital room, O'Connor's wounds begin to spontaneously expel the venom, and he regains consciousness, takes Gracie and flees. After Mulder and Scully find test results at Gerard Sharp's house revealing that he was infertile, Reverend Mackey tells them that Enoch O'Connor is the father of Gracie's child. Meanwhile, O'Connor takes Gracie back to his church and baptizes her. Gracie spontaneously goes into labour and gives birth to live snakes. O'Connor goes to Mackey's church and attempts to kill him, but Mulder intervenes and saves Mackey, wounding O'Connor. In the ambulance, Gracie tells Scully that Mackey is the real father of her baby and that he killed the others to prevent them from knowing the truth and to destroy O'Connor's congregation. Back at the church, Mulder realises O'Connor was innocent all along and confronts Mackey, but he locks the door and summons snakes, which promptly attack Mulder. Scully is able to break down the door and save Mulder in time. Mackey disappears but resurfaces in Connecticut, having changed his name to Reverend Wells and joins another church. After he accepts his new post, he sits at his desk, removes a live mouse from a box, then sits back as a snake emerges from its throat and devours it.
Thank you.
Weird episode.
I quite like this episode.
I don't mind the episode, it's really weird.
There are some things I've read about it online now that have taken the shine off this episode for me. But I remember it always being fun.
How many snakes died?
No snakes died.
Okay. Okay, that's better than I was expecting, because you got things like First Friday the 13th where they horribly kill a snake in that one, don't they?
They do, yes.
So what's taking the shine off of it?
Oh, well, think of the kind of things, because a lot of the snakes you see in this episode are rattlesnakes. It's not one of those things where they've thrown a corn snake in there or something harmless and claimed it's a rattlesnake.
They defanged them or something?
That's part of it, yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, it used to be a practice because, obviously we in the exotic pet community call venomous creatures hot. So lots of people, it's really kind of looked down upon to actually keep hots as a pet unless you're doing so in a research kind of environment because they're so dangerous.
Yeah.
And if they get out, they can be dangerous to anyone around you. So one of the common ways that hots used to be handled on screen, which I don't believe is really practiced much anymore, is they used to remove both their fangs and venom sacs. So you can have these dramatic scenes with lots and lots of venomous snakes with no one being at risk.
Yeah.
But the other thing they did to these snakes in this episode is they suited their mouths shut so they couldn't physically bite people. Which, again, is another practice where if you didn't want to defang a snake, of a temporary measure that you could use to make sure they couldn't bite anyone.
Yeah.
And, now it's largely established that that's incredibly cruel, and usually when you see things with vast lots of snakes, it'll either be done, like in Indiana Jones, with the cobra behind a screen.
Yeah.
So the cobra, to the camera trickery, looks like it's in the actor's face, but the actor's in no danger. Or you do it with CGI.
Yes. It is one of those things where you can sort of say this is the benefit of CGI at this point, is you don't actually have to have actual deadly snakes.
But it was an interesting thing for this episode in that because they knew that there was going to be as many as 50 snakes in any scene at any one time, they had to make sure that they only cast people who were okay with that. So they actually had them holding the snakes during the casting process to make sure nobody was going to freak out. Fear of snakes is called a feedophobia, so you don't want anyone like that. Interestingly, David Duchovny does have crippling feedophobia. So any scenes, particularly the one at the end where he's in the kind of room and he's surrounded by them, they said was all done by clever trickery and camera doubles because I think the comment said he wasn't within 3 blocks of that being filmed.
Oh, wow.
John Shaban, interestingly, is the other common kind of crew member who has a feedophobia and couldn't be present.
Okay. Interesting.
But yeah, it's taken the shine off me somewhat. I was watching the episode carefully because I was curious if they were just going to throw in the occasional python and claim it was a deadly snake. But to my eye, yeah, those all are rattlesnakes. And I don't condone that kind of cruelty towards snakes.
To be fair, I thought you said there was some royal pythons in some shots.
There was one shot where I saw something in a cage that I think was a royal python by its patterning. But, it could have just been a really pretty rattlesnake, I guess. You don't see it clearly, it's just in the background. So either it was a really, really pretty rattlesnake, or you just had some kind of harmless snakes just filling cages in the backgrounds of shots there.
Okay. So, to move away to slightly lighter subjects, both of our reverends in this episode are basically mad.
I quite like it.
Well, I mean, the actual snake handler guy is well, he's the normal good guy, ultimately. We're not entirely sure what led to him throwing Gracie out of his home. How much of that is even true, because there's some big question marks over that.
It did come from Mackie.
Yeah, so we don't know if we can really trust that.
Mm.
But in general, he seems fine. I mean, ultimately, he turns out to be a nice-ish guy, other than the whole baptizing and making his daughter give birth to snakes, though presumably that's what she was
And
pregnant with anyway.
his wife dying of multiple rattlesnake bites.
Yeah, it's a little bit suspect. But ultimately, he's positioned as the nice one. And I'd go, that's fine, except it's the whole bizarre constraint the script has to get him arrested, which is grab Scully and forces her hand into a box with a live rattlesnake. Like, what are you doing? This is a federal agent. Normally this doesn't go well.
Yeah.
If it bites her, even if it doesn't bite her, what you've done is assault.
The theme of this episode that the writer had to follow, which I believe was set by Spotnitz, was intolerance can be good. So when you have that in mind, you can see how he kind of took this and ran with it, because the guy who's portrayed as being the intolerant, kind of slightly shady, violent preacher is the one that's on the level in the end.
Yeah. At the same time, I just think they wrote themselves into a corner and needed to get him arrested somehow, and that was the best they could come up with. But it's such a stupid thing for anyone to do ever.
Yeah. They also had an idea for this episode, because they've cottoned onto the fact, as we've said before, is you can usually tell really early on who the guilty party is because Mulder hones in on them.
Yeah.
And they wanted to write one where the kind of audience was fooled just because Mulder hones in on the wrong person. So you think it has to be O'Connor because Mulder thinks that.
Yeah. But I mean, the ultimate thing though for Mackie is, okay, so Mackie is the actual mastermind of everything. I do think they failed to give him a motivation.
At all. Yeah.
At all. I don't understand why you did it. I also don't understand how, coincidentally, you also have snake powers. That's really good, convenient things you have there. And the live snake in his throat and everything. It's very much... Did you always have this and you just went around until you found another snake handling preacher you wanted to frame? Why did you want to frame him? Why did you make Gracie pregnant with snakes? Are you the devil? Could this have done with, like, the Orizon treatment and it turned out he is just Satan or something?
A lot of people have hit on the fact that he's some kind of demon.
Yeah, but we don't even build to it, because as you said, I think they're too concerned with making sure you don't guess it early that they failed to actually give him a reason.
Yeah, you've hit on what a lot of critics at the time did say about this episode, is it's kind of creepy and it's got this good level of kind of gruesome body horror there, but you don't know anything about Mackie at the end of it.
No, it's a twist in want of setup, because again, it's kind of like, it feels almost like they've written the episode when it is O'Connell or O'Connor, the snake guy. And then someone has said, okay, no, we're going to have to change it to make it the other guy because no one will see that one coming.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, fine, but then what does he have to do with anything?
I will say, as a fan of these kind of horror stories, I do like the pacing and I do like the special effects that they kind of use throughout this episode. You know, kind of things like the Rosemary's Baby-ish bit where she gives birth to the snakes and things like that.
All suitably grisly and gross and everything.
Yeah. And I also, the other scene I really enjoy in it is towards the start, there's a bit where you see both preachers reading the same passage from the Book of Revelations.
Yes.
But you've got the kind of insane evangelical version with, if you anger God, he'll vomit you out of his mouth, sort of thing. Versus Mackie doing a very calm kind of like Sunday school reading of it and asking questions. Now, this seems extreme, but what do you think it means? And I love that juxtaposition of the two scenes.
That was good. I mean, it is undercut a little bit by the staple remover turning into a snake, which is one of those whole, yeah, that really did happen, didn't it? She didn't just sort of jab herself with the staple remover. No, it was literal snake there. And I think that's one of the other things, is like, Iris dying is she didn't know anything.
Yeah.
All she knew was there was a phone call that couldn't get passed on. It's not like she knew any secret, so her killing her was just odd.
So if you're going down the Rosemary's Baby route, which it does lean heavily on Rosemary's Baby, for whatever reason Mackie has impregnated her to have his demony snaky spawn.
Yeah. And sure, why not?
Whether or not this was kind of wanted or not is kind of up in the air as well. It's unclear if it was consensual.
Yes, there's a lot of weird questions that are never resolved, but...
Because Jared, for example, is killed at the moment he discovers he's infertile, because presumably he believed he was the father till that point.
Yeah, well, as you would.
But you never really hear from Gracie's perspective of if she's aware who the father is, per se.
Yeah, I mean, I think you come down to the X-Files is failing at writing women again, because Gracie is really kind of a prop in this.
Yeah.
She doesn't have much, if anything, to do.
Because you go down this line of, evidently, Jared at least thought that the baby was his at first until it couldn't be. Then you believe that O'Connell, or O'Connor? You made me doubt myself now.
Yeah, well, I can't even remember his name. I just read O'Connor.
So the next stage is you think that O'Connor's raped his daughter.
Yes.
And then right at the end, we have the switcheroo and you find out that Mackie is actually the father of the demony snaky spawn.
Yeah.
Who you presume have actually escaped somewhere to cause more havoc because they don't get killed or anything, and Mulder sees those kind of little bloody trails leading off.
Yeah, so...
So there's a lot of snake demons in Tennessee now.
Probably a good idea not to go back there. Yeah, otherwise is, an effective horror thing, which is fine if you don't think about it at all.
Mm.
I'm realising there's not much to this episode again.
No.
It's kind of like it's just an excuse for lots of scenes with people with snakes and a few kind of really ultra-shocking twists that then kind of get undone.
I think you've done a kind of interesting thing in making the snake-handling church the good guys in this.
Yes.
Because there is something inherently kind of seedy and dangerous and not right, and you want to think of them as being the villains in your head.
Yeah.
When you see them next to the clean kind of fundamentalist church down the street.
Well, non-fundamentalist. The snakes are the fundamentalists.
The snakes are the fundamentalists. Sorry, I'm not good with Christians.
It's fine. Yeah, they're kind of more New Agey or born-again Christian. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but it's much more
very
modern.
happy clappy.
Yeah, it's a much more modern thing versus the snake people who are borderline a cult out in the middle of the woods in basically a shack with no electricity.
But that juxtaposition also kind of is interesting because the snake handling church looks a lot more fun.
Yes, well, they generally are.
I mean, it's hellfire and brimstone, but they've got the live music there and everyone's clapping and singing and dancing, and then you keep cutting to the other one and everything's stark white and they're just sat having a quiet discussion.
Well, I say the other thing about it, I think where it's sort of fallen down a bit is you're trying to juxtapose two different interpretations of Christian faith. One thing about how they're doing it, though, is time of day becomes a factor. Mm. So for O'Connor, this looks like the main congregation happening or some, like, the regular service.
Yeah.
In the middle of the night. Mm. Whereas Mackie's lot, that looks like an after-church group, because that's, like, a trivial amount of people there.
It looks a bit Sunday schoolish.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if at one stage, because we know these scripts evolve quite wildly and we don't always get the details about how they have evolved, if that whole thing about, in the synopsis, that Mackie's trying to destroy O'Connor's congregation is there has been some kind of sway between the two churches, and basically O'Connor is winning at the moment and Mackie's losing. But you're still not getting Mackie's not running a proper service. He's having a discussion about the Bible, whereas O'Connor is running a proper service.
Yeah.
It's a bit odd, basically. And the juxtaposition is good, but not juxtaposing the same things.
So you'd have rather there have been Mackie doing a proper church service?
Yeah, or I mean, like midnight mass kind of thing would be a more appropriate comparison. Though mass is the wrong.
Mass is Catholic.
Yeah, and mass is too old. It needs to be much more modern to actually contrast properly.
Yeah.
But then again, you also have the inverse because O'Connor has like guitars and singing. That's much more modern Christian thing to have that kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
So it's an odd.
Interesting as well, that song that they're singing is a gospel song that was written specifically for the episode as well.
Okay.
Because apparently Kim Manners auditioned a lot of different sort of gospel songs for it, and in the end somebody he challenged someone, I can't remember exactly who it was now, to see if they could write something better, and they did. So this kind of one that was specifically written for the episodes got chosen over the existing ones.
Oh, okay. What possessed anyone to have something called Signs and Wonders next to an episode called Sein and Zeit, which sound like they should go together?
I said this on my stream the other day, it sounds like it should be a two-parter, but it's not. They're not connected in any way.
But it does sound like you have the title in English and you have a title in German. That means something, or will mean something when you see part 2. Mm. No.
Except Signs and Wonders is a common reoccurring phrase used in the Bible, and Sein and Zeit is a book by Martin Heidegger.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. Mm. Good old Heidegger. You can do the horse laugh if you want.
Oh, is that the Final Fantasy one?
Yeah.
What's his laugh in Final Fantasy?
he's ha 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 ha.
I see. I know they've all, like One Piece, they've all got a different laugh.
And Scarlet was kya ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Because that's how Reeve recalls them later on. Kya ha ha and kya ha ha. Do we have anything else for Signs and Wonders?
I don't think there's actually much to talk about.
No.
It's a perfectly fine Monster of the Week episode. It's nothing special.
Well, I would say that's a thing that seems to be being borne out as we go deeper into season 7, is it has catastrophes and it also has middle of the road episodes. And there's been, 2 highlights so far? And like, Melini is kind of above average, but not great.
I'd say that my favourite Monster of the Weeks this season are probably Hungary and the Goldberg variation.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree.
I'd agree with
Nothing's
those.
kind of stood out beyond those.
No, they have been a high point so far, and but we're getting, despite what we got that quote from Vince Gilligan about how they did experimental stuff, but season 7 seems to be aggressively middle of the road, aggressively median.
I'd take medium though because it hasn't fallen to the lows of some of the other seasons we've seen yet.
Not yet, anyway.
Is that where the next few episodes are going to say, "Hey, hold my beer"?
I can imagine so. So we might have to talk about Sein and Zeit, nothing to do with Signs and Wonders.
No.
And heed all the warnings at the start of the episode, because this is a dark one again.
Yeah, this is an incredibly dark episode. So, warnings again, if you didn't catch the start of this podcast, we are going to be discussing child death and suicide. It is quite graphic, this episode.
So, Sein and Zeit, directed by Michael Watkins, written by Frank Spotness and Chris Carter. First broadcast on the 6th of Feb 2000. I'm realising now I need to have a Carter scream like the Shaban one.
Thinking like Wrath of Khan?
Yeah, just because I've been blaming Shaban for a lot of stuff, and I think some of it's warranted, but Chris Carter also, it's a case of his name coming up does not instill confidence most of the time anymore. He did at one stage.
I've got to admit, now that we don't have Darren Morgan, I kind of live for the Vince Gilligan episodes. They're the ones that I consistently enjoy.
Yes, well, we are getting Darren Morgan back eventually, and I will point out the anecdote I have about when we found that was going to happen. Which I thought was really funny when how we found out Darren Morgan was
We're
coming
still
back.
a few seasons away from Darren Morgan
We
coming
are,
back,
unfortunately,
right?
so. But anyway, guest stars for this episode are Mark Ralston, who we have seen before, but we'll do him again because that was back in season 2 when we had him.
Yeah, it would have been.
Who played Bud LaPierre, whose most famous thing is, of course, Aliens, where he was Drake.
Mm-hmm.
He's also in Lethal Weapon 2, RoboCop 2, The Shawshank Redemption, Saw 5 and Saw 6.
Yep, he is.
And this is one I've sort of pulled out because I've never seen it, but I understand exactly what the film is from the title. He was in That Guy Who Was in That Thing.
Is that actually the title?
That's the title. It's a documentary about these people who you point at the screen and go, it's that guy from that thing.
Ah, he is very much that guy from that thing sort of actor.
Exactly, and it's about him and like 16 other people. And it sounds like it's kind of funny, but it'll be a case of you sort of point and go, Drake from Aliens.
Yeah.
He's also in Star Trek Next Generation and Enterprise, Babylon 5. And a special note now, because you told me something just before this, and we'll get to it in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
He was in Harsh Realm.
Ah, interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I thought you'd like that. But also has done a bit of voice work. So he was also in Voltron, the Netflix version.
Okay.
Blade Runner, the game.
Okay.
And Dragon Age Origins.
Oh, right. Did you mention that he was in a previous X-Files episode?
Oh, I forgot. Yes, he was. He was also the Reverend in Red Museum. I can't remember his entire name.
Orin.
Orin.
Something
Reverend
or
Orin.
Yeah.
Reverend Orin. Reverend Orin in Red Museum, which also dealt with walk-ins. Put a pin in that. We also have Spencer Garrett, who played Harry Bring. This is their lawyer, the real estate lawyer.
Okay, the real estate lawyer. Yep.
He's been in Star Trek Next Generation and Voyager. He was in the George of the Jungle film.
Okay.
Iron Man 3. Legend of Korra. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh, I did think he looked a bit familiar.
But we also have Kim Darby, who played Kathy Lee Tenkate. Now, she was in Teen Wolf 2, which is one of these hilarious things. I have seen this film. I do not remember it.
I didn't know there was one.
No one does. There was Michael J. Fox Teen Wolf. There was a sequel to it. When the TV series came out, it was really funny to see people telling people about the sequel to Teen Wolf. They go, what?
Fair enough.
There's more than one. Michael J. Fox was not in it by that point.
I'm not surprised.
People barely remember Teen Wolf anyway. It's like a weird film that Michael J. Fox was in. She was also in Halloween Curse of Michael Myers. But the interesting ones, She was in the original Star Trek
Okay.
back in 1966. But also, she was in True Grit, the original one.
Oh, right, yeah.
Where she was Matty, the girl who hires John Wayne to go off and do things.
Yeah.
We haven't seen it, we've seen the remake, but you know exactly which character that is.
Yeah. I've seen the remake.
Pretty good, that one.
Oh, yeah, it is.
But can you tell us about, was it Body and Soul? Body and Time. Being in Time.
Which is what Sein and Zeit actually means, for the record.
And not Signs and Wonders like it keeps us like it should be.
Mm.
Though Zeit is always time because we know. Yeah.
In a admittedly slightly confusing opening sequence, we see a little girl who's called Amber Lynn Pierre disappear from her bed after a series of strange events. We see her mother going and shutting herself in the bedroom and seemingly writing a kidnapping note for her own daughter, and her father going in to check on her and having a vision of picking up his daughter's corpse before, everything writing in him just seeing the daughter asleep. However, as he leaves the room, the door locks behind him, and when they force it, they discover her bed empty. Although Skinner has put together a crack task force to deal with the kidnapping, which is rapidly becoming high profile, Mulder begs to be part of the investigation. We as the viewer are aware this is because he's seeing connections with Samantha's disappearance. In the end, Mulder convinces Skinner just to give him a few hours to question the family, noting that the first few hours are critical and he wants to make sure the correct questions are asked. When Mulder interviews the parents of Amber, Billy and Bud Lapierre, they tell Mulder they found a note in the girl's bedroom. However, we already know that this is a lie, and Mulder quickly also cottons on to the correct fact, as we know that the note was written by Billy and therefore was not found in the room of the girl. The FBI quickly begin to suspect that Billy did write the note herself because there are similarities in the handwriting. However, the note contains a bizarre mention to Santa Claus, specifically the phrase, "No one shoots at Santa," which seems out of place and doesn't really seem to make sense. Mulder personally does not believe that the family are responsible, even though they are held for questioning. He looks through previous cases he has in the X-Files and finds a very similar note with the same reference to Santa Claus from a missing persons case in Idaho from 1987. In that case, the mother of the girl was convicted and sentenced to 12 years, after a few years admitting that she had been lying and that she had murdered her son. Mulder also notes that in the file about the case, the woman had a vision of her son's death before he disappeared, just as Bud did before Amber disappeared. As Mulder begins his investigation, he receives a message from his mother, Tina, who has grown distressed after watching the case unfold on TV and realised that Mulder is likely to be a part of it. She asks him to call her back, saying there are things that she needs to tell him. Mulder's investigation continues as he visits the incarcerated woman, whose name is Kathy Lee Tenkate. Kathy sticks to her story that she was indeed the murderer of her son, giving a very weak explanation as to what the Santa Claus message meant. Mulder realises that she's lying. She's only saying this so she'd be viewed more favourably, because she realises admitting that what actually happened would make her look insane. Mulder convinces her that she needs to help to prevent Billy from being put in jail, and Kathy does eventually agree to this after she has another vision of her son's ghost. As Skinner chews out Mulder for his methods back in the office, Scully comes in and interrupts. Unfortunately, Mulder's mother Tina has been found dead in her home. As Mulder arrives at the scene, it becomes very apparent that it was actually a suicide. They found that she overdosed on the diazepam she was taking to help her sleep, and also she had left the gas on and sealed around the edges of the doors to make doubly sure. Mulder, however, is convinced it is a murder. Because of the message that Tina left for him, she believes that whoever she was going to implicate has found her and murdered her, staging it to look like a suicide to hide the truth. He coerces Scully into doing an autopsy on his mother. However, Scully finds nothing of the sort. It seems that this is a genuine suicide. She also discovers that Tina was terminally ill, and this is possibly what she was intending to tell Mulder before she died. This revelation does shock Mulder to the core. He was starting to connect Mulder's experiences with Samantha's disappearance to what Billy is going through, believing that a walk-in was responsible. A walk-in is a kind of spirit who is taking children to shield them from potential future harm. So, in this case, is snatching them away because they would have otherwise died horribly. Mulder, however, realises that he's now so close to the investigation he can't see the woods for the trees, and asks Skinner if he'll take him off the case and give him a leave of absence. However, before any of this can happen, Mulder and Skinner are called to Billy's home, where she has something that she will only tell Mulder. Scully, concerned for Mulder, does tag along, however. Billy tells Mulder that she had a vision of her daughter in her room, and that she mouthed the number 74. Mulder now believes that, although he was optimistic to this point, if Billy is seeing ghosts, it probably means that Amber is dead. As they drive back to the airport, Scully notices the signs for Route 74 and quickly looks at a map, realising that they're close to a kind of all-year-round Santa park. She makes a connection, of course, between this and the kind of note about nobody shoots at Santa. When they arrive here, they find a videotape set up and tapes dating all the way back to the 1960s, including a very recent one of Amber Lynn LaPierre, who evidently visited the park a few days before her disappearance. The man who runs the park tries to flee from them and is promptly stopped and arrested by Skinner. In the place where they chase him down, Mulder notices that there are a lot of tiny little graves.
And on that horrifying note, thank you.
You're welcome. It is a really, really dark episode.
It is, and also kind of baffling in places.
We will note that it's the first part of a two-parter, so we're only judging this based on Sein and Zeit.
Yes, and
there could be explanations coming next week. We don't know yet.
We don't know. But to pick one to start with is, what on earth is going on in the Sting?
I found that scene so confusing, and admittedly, it does very quickly explain what you're seeing. But it's just the mother taking herself away and writing a kidnapping note. I was starting to think, is that their daughter? Have they kidnapped someone?
Who can say? Well, I was saying, there's that bit, and you kind of get the whole something weird is happening. But then we get Bud goes to see his daughter and sees a vision of her dead. And then blink and she's fine again, and that's great.
Yeah.
Then he steps out the door slams, and when they break it down, the daughter's gone. And as far as we are aware, based on just this episode, Santa Claus has kidnapped her and possibly killed her?
Yeah, I guess you gotta take that, unless she was spirited away just before this occurred.
Well, yeah, we'll have to try and, I don't know how we're going to talk about walk-ins, because this is a headache. It was a headache in Red Museum, it's twice as headachy now.
It's more confusing in this episode, but the general concept of a walk-in, it's like when you see someone doing a seance and the spirit enters their body and can speak through them.
Yeah.
That would be a walk-in.
And I get that's what's happened to the mother.
And some people believe that they're susceptible to this and can, manifest walk-ins to allow the dead to speak.
Yeah, which is what Reverend Oren was doing through his computer, which we're not going to get into how weird Red Museum was.
But you do get that idea of the concept of walking and the fact that what she's doing is apparently automatic writing.
Yeah.
Which, again, is a trick that psychics use where some other spirit moves your hand.
Yeah. It's just the whole, where did Amber Lynn go and how, and because Mulder asked the question of, no one saw her taken at a relatively early hour.
No one saw her taken, and apparently the house was all locked up as well. Yeah. So nobody broke in.
Yeah, so I don't understand this. I mean, Closure might explain this. I don't remember Closure very well at all.
Do you see in the end of the episode that not only is Santa remarkably fast, but he's also incredibly stealthy?
Yes.
Because, I mean, he goes completely undetected until he runs, and when he does run, he outruns Skinner for a good few minutes.
Yes.
Skinner, who is, ex-military.
Yeah, until he fires a warning shot.
Mm.
But, I mean, we made a little joke about it, but do we want to sort of mention Bud's watching something on TV, something he says is, this is pretty good, or this is good? It's
he can't remember what it is, but he says he says it to himself first, and then he says it to Mulder later that it was a pretty good show.
Yeah. And we have to then say, sorry, who wrote this episode again? And it's Frank Sputnik, okay, and it's Chris Carter. And I'm building up to, because this has been a running joke, and I didn't realize we're actually building to something like this. This is completely off the cuff, but I'm glad I've been highlighting this for so long. The name of the TV show that Bud is watching is
Harsh Realms.
Harsh Realms. Chris Carter's other failed series,
which was only cancelled shortly before this episode aired.
Which possibly means it was still going on when it was actually filmed.
Yeah.
So this was say, hey guys, watch my other TV series. It's pretty good. So saith Drake from Aliens.
Yep.
Chris, this is terrible. Your crossover for Millennium didn't work. This one doesn't work either.
No, it's knowing that reference. It's the one bit of brevity in this plot, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, aside from the bits where it it's just weird, this episode. And also, we have the writers being kind of tasteless. Again.
Ah, you're talking about the real world case.
Yeah, guys, what is wrong with you?
Again, like, they did a similar thing with Uberlet, I think.
Yeah, and it was...
You have to be a bit careful talking about it because there are real world implications here.
Yeah, and Uberlet, I think the worst bit was it was so recent to when the episode went out.
Yeah, that was more problematic, but that's why they aged up the girl in Uberlet, so to remove the similarity.
That's really weak, guys.
So yeah, the actual uncannily similar case in this is a murder of a child beauty queen whose name was John Bennett Ramsey. So, John Bennett Ramsey was tragically defiled and killed and later found in her family's basement. However, the similarities with this case are that the parents presented what appeared to be a ransom note stating she'd been kidnapped because her father had come into a lot of money, but the letter was found to be in the mother's handwriting, or at least reported to be in the mother's handwriting. And also, one of the main suspects that they entertained was a local man who entertained kids by dressing as Santa.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a bit uncannily like this case.
I think the triple-barreled name as well is sort of another giveaway that they've just... That was the name. That was the name in the script, and it's been search replaced late on or something.
You often find in American cases though that they do often triple barrel names, so there can be no confusion. That's why so many serial killers have the triple names.
Oh, true. But for victims, like Amber Lynn,
I'm not sure you do it for victims so much, but usually in American law, it's just so we're clear on the person we're talking about. Because you might, I guess, have a lot of John Gassies, but only one John Wayne Gassy.
True. We did have words with how Mulder hasn't got himself fired this week. Again. I mean, okay, he hasn't shot anyone this time, so he's one up on Scully.
Yep, true.
On the other hand, he has just pushed his way into a missing child case and said, I need to go and talk to these people before anyone else so that the right questions are asked. And as you pointed out, he asks exactly the same questions that you'd expect the FBI to be asking.
I think it's the common sense questions that anyone would ask in a kidnapping of, where did you find the note? What time did this occur? Were the doors locked? He doesn't ask any of his usual weird-ass Mulder, have you ever seen an alien sort of questions.
Yeah. And I think on the back of that as well, there's the persistent point in this episode that basically Mulder wants this because of the inevitable personal comparisons. And you know what? That's fine. But where was this in the last 7 seasons? Aside from a few very specific instances.
Paper Hearts, I think, is the one that springs to mind.
Oubliette you can make a case for as well. But he's not doing it all the time.
He's not going after every missing child case.
Yeah, or specifically missing girl child as well, I think, is the other thing he's queuing off of.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you mentioned Paper Hearts, because there's the unavoidable comparison between the 2 episodes, really, isn't there?
Yeah. Apparently this came off the back of Paper Hearts doesn't really have closure, and throughout the years Chris Carter had been hounded a lot at conventions by people saying, so what actually did happen? Was Paper Hearts real? That sort of thing. And when he got to the point of writing Sein and Zeit and Closure, at the time, they thought this might be the final season, and he realised he was running out of time to actually address these questions for people. Which is why he decided to make Paper Hearts 2.0, basically, to explain what happened 100% to Samantha.
Yeah. So that brings us to the other end of the episode, where suddenly Samantha actually enters into proceedings directly, and gives you a preview of what closure might be about to reveal. We can't talk about it yet. Can say that I don't remember this going well, but we have to watch again. It's been a long time since we watched it.
Actually, you say the connections to Paper Hearts, but there was one sentence uttered in this episode that just stuck in my head and I couldn't get it out after hearing it.
Okay.
And I think it is just clumsy, whimsical wording. It's one thing that Kethy says when she's explaining to Mulder, like, the nature of the children, who we assume these are the kind spirits, the walk-ins.
Yeah.
And she says they live in starlight. We've had the phrase, it hides in the light, in the X-Files once before.
Oh yeah, that was full idea, wasn't it?
Yes, it was just when she says they live in the starlight, I just got They hide in the light stuck in my head, and kind of it takes a sinister tone then, because you're thinking back to previous X-Files we've seen, and yes, we had another monster that hid in the light. Wasn't benevolent in any way.
No, I mean, we have to wait till next week to sort of say ultimately whether we should have gone the polyhedra route for this.
It's one of those unfortunate things. It's because the two lines are so similar that once it was in my head, I couldn't get it out, and it kind of ruined the idea of these kind of what we think. They basically sound like fae, these nice, kind spirits that will take away children to a place where they're not going to feel any pain.
Yes, allegedly. Okay, I mean, at the moment, and we'll have to wait till closer to see if we actually get an actual timeline on how they work. We don't quite understand what point they take the children as to how they're going to come out with this. But
I guess if and admittedly, it is a woman who keeps seeing ghosts who's in prison who has given us this information about the walk-ins. But seems to be legit. More people have seen the ghosts, and the cases are horrifyingly similar.
Yeah.
But I guess they've got to be taken after, because we know that Samantha was taken by the Syndicate. She wasn't snatched by another force before the Syndicate got there.
No.
So she has to have been taken by them in the first instance. So I guess maybe the same for these, that Santa is taking them, but something else is getting to them before they're horribly abused by the serial killer.
Well, that's probably the optimistic way of doing it. I mean, we do have... This does bring to mind that one of the worst clashes the X-Files can ever do is... It's never a good thing whenever you try to do religious stuff and alien stuff at the same time, because inevitably you're asking some really awkward questions about both sides of that argument. But crashing the supernatural world into the alien world as well, as this would seem to be pushing towards, that's also going to make you go, no, wait, hang on, how... we can kind of get different episodes, different viewpoints, but if you've got the actual supernatural forces of Earth connecting into the Syndicate, that raises a lot of really awkward questions. And we're gonna have to figure on, it's gonna be interesting to deal with those Samantha clones. Those multiple Samantha clones we've seen wandering around, and the alleged real one, who there's no one's been able to explain or mention for a while now.
You also get a weird tone for this episode based on their choice of title, which Sein and Zeit, as we said, are Being and Time.
Yeah.
Which is the seminal work by the philosopher Martin Heidegger.
Yeah, ha ha ha. So,
the real Heidegger, not the Final Fantasy Heidegger.
Well, I don't actually... it feels harsh, but I'm not sure he's illiterate.
But philosophy is what I studied in university, though I must admit that Heidegger is not one of my philosophers that I know a lot about. However, he's a forerunner, I understand, of something called phenomenology.
Okay.
So the idea of phenomenology, its a counterpart is... Everyone knows Descartes and the cogito. Cogito ergo sum is I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
Well, what usually happens is the cogito actually goes further than that. That's just the first step of Cartesian meditations. So eventually you build up to the idea of, from this you work your way up to being able to know for a fact that a God exists. Everything exists because God is the perceiver of all things.
Okay.
Phenomenology is the opposite of that, basically, because it focuses on something called the lived experience. So it's the idea of everything exists around you because you are a living thing and you are experiencing it. So, it puts that power in you rather than an external observer.
Okay.
It stems from the idea of, the room exists because you're currently looking at it. You can't prove the room exists when you move out, but when you come back in, it's there and it exists.
Yeah.
So you've got an idea of how the world works because of your lived experience.
Object permanence and all that.
Which is kind of a weird thing to hedge on for your title when our lived experience now is currently involving walk-ins.
Yeah, that's an odd choice.
So I'm not... As I said, maybe I'm missing something slightly because I didn't really study Heidegger. I know of his teachings, I haven't read this particular text. But it's one of those things where I think we've taken a title because of the way it sounds rather than the meaning behind it.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
Yeah.
We also have, I think, the fastest Mulder's belief system has crashed and been restored ever. You don't normally get it in the same episode, do you?
Well, he completely loses faith. He hasn't entirely got it back by the end.
He hasn't entirely got it back, but...
He's just kind of confused before Scully makes that 74 connection.
Yeah, but it's still the whole... Oh, my sister was never abducted by aliens. She was sort of killed by a serial killer, possibly Santa Claus. And you want to say, again, didn't we do this in Paper Hearts?
And in Paper Hearts, we more or less actually disproved it was him because...
There was inaccuracies.
Yeah, he didn't know where the house was when actually pressed and things like that.
He was close, but not outside the realms of possibility of him figuring out from what he could find out.
Yeah. I thought that was more compelling as well. As we've said, this is kind of Paper Hearts 2, but Paper Hearts was kind of from the perspective of the killer, whereas this is from the perspective of the victim.
Yeah, and it's not as effective.
No, you got more of that kind of Silence of the Lambs cat and mouse game going with the actor who played a really compelling serial killer.
Yeah, versus the off-screen Santa Claus, who is not.
Speaks once, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. I think he gives it... Does he say his name?
He says his name right at the end, but
I
didn't catch it, but Scully asks his name right at the end.
He also does respond to the parent
who asks if they're going to see Santa Claus.
I mean, we'll also sort of detour into who on earth goes to an all-year-round Santa Claus village? I mean, really?
It's so creepy.
It's so creepy. It's
all
so
the
weird.
kind of faded signs to it and stuff like that.
Yeah, it looks like it's been abandoned for 50 years. But no, it's still an operation, and
it's on the map. It must be fairly popular.
It must be. Don't want to get into that, but we are going to have to talk about Tina Mulder and the fact that we can never remember that she actually lasts this long.
I've got to admit, when she had her stroke a couple of seasons back, I thought that was her out. I didn't remember her persisting past it.
No, and I suppose the other thing that comes off of that is we know that she is suffering from, although this is a bit confused because you found this doesn't quite make sense.
Yeah, Scully calls it Paget's carcinoma, and when I googled that, admittedly, I came up with a thing saying it was breast cancer, which, again, it's a rare form of breast cancer, but it is breast cancer. However, Paget's disease is a kind of debilitating and progressive bone disorder, a bit like osteoporosis. So I think Scully might have meant Paget's disease.
Yeah.
When she says it's disfiguring and stuff like that, it sounds more like a bone disorder than breast cancer.
Yeah, and that makes a bit more sense. The thing I can't help take away from this is, Mrs. Mulder, you know far more about the conspiracy than you've ever let on.
She's always been very vague, but you get the impression she knows virtually everything, to be honest.
She knows an awful lot. And I don't think for a second she doesn't know who the very big guy we know as Alien Bounty Hunter was standing beside her bed when she woke up after the stroke. I've been leading up to the whole, she has this disease, did she not ring a certain Mr. Spencer and say, you know your guy... The guy who cures lung cancer, cures strokes, can heal anything, as far as you can tell. Can he come over and do some stuff?
In fairness, she doesn't want anything to do with him. She hates the cancer man.
She hates him, but she's not. She doesn't. It's complicated because she also talked to him when Mulder was taken away in the Sixth Extinction because they were both there.
You don't know if she has a way of contacting him though, because he always finds her.
True, but you think he'd know about this? I feel it's just a whole. Cancer man is investing in keeping her alive. And somehow doesn't know about this.
Yeah.
And I don't buy that he can't know this.
True.
But then we get into the whole... How this bit now works is a bit complicated because it's like very convenient timing. Because you can see Mulder's conspiratorial mindset of his mother was trying to tell him something and now she's dead. He blames the conspiracy. And that's fine for his conspiratorial mindset. That makes sense for him at this point in time. Because his mother does know things that she shouldn't know.
And you have that weird scene where she was burning pictures of Samantha before she called him.
Yeah, and that's where I get into the inverse of it, which is, it's kind of, it feels far too coincidental for her to have decided to commit suicide now, and then Morden doesn't call her and she commits suicide, and then she can't tell him whether she was going to tell him. So, and we're left, though, with an awkward question of, did she want to say something? Does she actually know a bit more than she's ever let on? It's
very akin to Scully's dad dying in Beyond the Sea, where he had the message that she'll never know.
Yeah, but then the difference there, though, is that's a message of faith in his daughter, and basically what's borne out ultimately in Beyond the Sea is that he never sort of judged her for this.
Yeah.
He was always very proud of her no matter what, and that came through to her.
She was worried, but he just wanted to let her know with his last gesture that he approved of her.
Yeah, whereas what Mrs. Mulder might be saying at this point could be horrendously complicated, given that there's that question mark That's been hanging over Samantha since season 1.
Yeah.
They thought this might be the last one. This is their last shot at doing it. But then Mrs. Mulder decides to burn all her family pictures, which is a very odd decision.
And apparently very shortly afterwards kill herself.
Yeah.
And as far as we can tell, regardless of what Mulder initially suspects, she has legitimately killed herself.
So it's hard not to buy into Mulder's conspiratorial mindset, and that she has been killed to silence her. At the same time, Mulder really, that phone call was so vague.
It made me think a lot of the very famous scene in Buffy the Vampire Slayer where Joyce Summers dies.
I can see that.
Because that follows the same basis of, it's the end of an episode, Buffy comes home and finds her dead on the sofa. And it goes through a whole episode of her trying to find what supernatural means has done this and if they can reverse it. And it turns out that she's just had an aneurysm burst in her brain or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's the whole, in a series where you expect the answer to be supernatural, it just being something crushingly mundane.
Yes. And I have a sneak suspicion that's what they're gesturing towards in this, and they unfortunately missed the mark again.
It doesn't carry the same weight. I mean, that is an entire episode that just focuses on that has virtually no music in it as well. It's an incredible episode.
Well, I think it's literally none.
Yeah.
There's a production note. But I think the difference there, though, is Joyce Summers is a mundane person in the universe, like Xander, but she more so has nothing, there's nothing special about her.
And she's been a mainstay from the start. She's one of the principal cast.
Yeah. And also, she is become aware of supernatural stuff. She is perfectly willing to wait on the sidelines. She knows a little bit. She knows who Spike is. She knows what Giles does.
Yeah.
Has been affected by a few bits of magic and everything, but generally, she's content to live her life as it is. So her dying is kind of taking away one of the last bits of normalcy Buffy has in her life.
Yes.
Versus Tina Mulder, who, from first appearances, has progressively said, I don't know anything about the conspiracy stuff your dad was involved in. Oh, yeah, I was signing the paychecks at the Pentagon while this was going on.
And when pressed, she just gets upset and manages to get out of saying anything on the basis of being too upset to do so.
Exactly. The other thing, though, and this is the infuriating thing about how they vary their referencing back to previous episodes, is Colony should be a blinking red light to Mulder. Because Tina Mulder and Bill Mulder entertained a woman who was in her 30s, looked about the right, had the right kind of hair, right kind of age, had the right look, who was purporting to be Samantha Mulder. She wasn't, but as far as we know, she was cloned from Samantha Mulder.
And she knew things.
And she knew things. She knew enough to fill in the gaps of the story to make sense.
Yeah.
She was probably lying, as we know afterwards, and we've still got Cancer Man's daughter, who we still don't know who the hell that is, other than it's another clone, but quite why we're doing that in Redux, I don't understand. But if Mulder was writing a conjecture here that his mum's always known that Samantha was not abducted by aliens, what was going on in Colony? Because that was not for his benefit. Because they called him way after she actually showed up and started talking to the family.
Yeah.
Because I think it's even a problem as near as The Blessing Way and Paperclip. Is as soon as she started saying that, it's like Bill Mulder has to know that wasn't her when she showed up. And it was the question mark over whether Tina Mulder knew it wasn't her. And now Mulder is postulating that both of his parents knew that wasn't his sister. Which point you say, why did they play along?
Quite.
It's just nonsense.
But of course, we're now speculating just on the basis of Sein and Zeit, and
Yes.
we don't know what closure is going to give us.
We don't.
Which we're hoping is closure.
We
to
have
be fair.
closure. But it's a frustrating thing of Mulder, and I understand the argument will be Mulder's not thinking coherently, he's got his whole mindset is out of whack and everything. But you'd think the events of Colony would be something you would keep returning to, that's hard to overlook.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I think they overlook for Colony is his voiceover in the first episode says he now has personal proof that aliens are here.
Yeah.
The fact he loses that faith in 2 seasons' time is just infuriating, but still. He absolutely believed that in Colony that aliens were real. And now and as we said, I think for Paper Hearts is perfectly fine. It just had to happen earlier.
Yeah.
And this episode as well is, well, Paper Hearts has already stolen your whole bit. You can't do this episode now.
I do understand Carter's thing of, I've been dangling this carrot from the start, and if I'm not going to get any more seasons, I need to wrap it up.
Absolutely.
But it kind of depends on if that very hasty wrap-up is going to be satisfactory,
Yes.
which we will only know next week, unfortunately.
But yeah, we'll save it for next week. At the same time, I would equate this to Twin Peaks, where the whole Who Killed Laura Palmer was the genesis of the whole series. David Lynch and Mark Frost had no interest in resolving it.
And it was just essentially our MacGuffin that carried us through the first season.
Yeah. And it was just meant to be just to introduce everyone into the cast, bring all the people together, and then set them off doing their thing. Network said, no, you need to tell us who killed Laura Palmer. And the revelation works as well as it might do, because they do it quite slowly. At the same time, making it fit to the clues they planted earlier, that's where it fell apart.
I think the clumsy one for me was always the gum you like will come back in style. And how clumsily that is forced to make sense.
Exactly, and it's very much David Lynch was presumably saying, right, we're going to put some clues in. We don't care what they mean. They're just going to be clues.
Have the most stylish character in the series give the killer some gum. Yeah, that does it.
I know, that's gibberish. This is terrible. But they had to do it to make that episode wrap up together.
Yeah.
So, and I can see that, for one thing, it's good for Chris Carter that the network didn't tell him he has to do this, like David Lynch was forced to.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think you could have left it dangling forever. I mean, we didn't... Ultimately, this is Mulder's religion. You don't need to give him God. You just need to keep on looking for it.
Yeah. And, again, X-Files has a huge and very vocal fandom that do, to this day, still write fanfictions for it, things like that. This is the kind of thing that it would always be a mystery what the canonical answer was, but fanfic writers would go to town with it.
Yes. I mean, you have so many options already. I mean, the basic one is just basically, by all implication, especially Colony, because I'm going to keep on going out to Colony, because Colony is like the fulcrum of Samantha Mulder, is she is on a ship somewhere. The aliens have got her. We're not quite sure what they're doing with her, but they've cloned her.
I'd even go on the basis we know the clones exist. Samantha, as Mulder knows her, could be dead.
Yes.
However, her legacy is living on in a cloning program.
Yes, and presumably they either know enough or they can do brain scans. We don't know what the aliens can do half the time, but...
Well, we don't know how the cloning works if it is carrying memory.
Yeah.
Like cellular memory.
Yeah, one of these clones could be a copy of Samantha early enough point that basically functionally she is Samantha. And maybe one day she can come back into Mulder's life. We still can't say for sure that one in Redux isn't either genuine or the closest to that.
Yeah.
All we know is that she's not got time for Mulder, and Mulder just doesn't think she's real anymore.
Yeah.
Because there was that throwaway line of, didn't you meet her last year? Nah, I don't think that was her. On what basis?
Yeah.
Santa Claus.
Yes, Santa Claus.
So the other thing that got me about the episode was, so Scully, you said this Santa Claus village has to be big enough to be on a road map.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, admittedly, they're possibly in a slightly sparsely populated area, but it's close enough.
It's been there a long time as well, because those tapes went back to the 60s.
Yeah, so he's been plausibly doing this for a while, kidnapping children via one method we've no idea about, maybe Closure will get into that, and killing them for whatever reason. We don't really want to speculate on that, and bury them in a vast field, and no one has noticed this very lumpy field over the years.
And also the fact that you've had 2 kidnapping notes that have mentioned Santa Claus, yet neither parent said, hang on, we visited that Santa Claus village 2 days ago.
That's what I don't get it, because it's that whole thing where they look at the video of the girl, and it's like he was dated 2 years, dated for a reduction. If we go through tapes and he has video footage of everyone, someone's head's going to roll in the whole... So you didn't think that everyone had this shared connection, that this was going to be really significant. Because we don't actually know if Kathy has the same experience.
No.
But
she did write the note about Santa Claus.
But they're definitely insinuating it. I mean, it's still, we come back to that problem of we don't know the order of events of the walk-ins making her write the note before the kidnap actually happened, rather than stopping the kidnapping. Which, could you not do that?
When you've got any story that involves... They still make me think of fairies, but I'm going to say ghosts.
Yeah.
You don't know what the capacity of the ghosts are. There's... Like in the Patrick Swayze ghost movie, the effort he has to expend to be able to move even the smallest thing.
Oh, true.
So it's like maybe these child's ghosts can move a hand. However, writing a note saying, that guy at the Santa Village did it, go get him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this reminds me, again, I keep going back to it, The Messengers. It's possibly because Cancerman's in that one.
Yeah.
Of the whole, they're trying to send us a warning. They were sending you warnings by making you look like you were a victim of self-abuse.
Yeah.
Because you had scars and scratches and then people thought you were being hospitalised. And not just making you sort of scrawl something on the ground.
Well, I think that's explored if anyone's ever seen the stage play 222.
Yes.
Which I will not spoil the twist for you, but the idea, they kind of bounce around in it because it's all about a group of people meeting in a house where one woman's convinced a ghost always appears at 222, and so they decide to wait it out and see if they see it.
Yes.
But they have all these discussions about why ghosts do creepy things, and it's the whole, maybe, you've been killed, you're not in a good frame of mind, you're confused, and you don't entirely know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that's why you can hear footsteps or someone crying or something like that. It's because it's very confusing and the ghost doesn't know where they are either.
Yes. And I mean, I think that's probably the best way of doing it, because I think, like The Messengers, it's the late stage twist they wanted of, oh, you thought the ghost was the villain. No, it's actually the farmhand who's, the serial killer.
Yeah.
And it's, yes, that's fine, but the ghosts are now basically acting incoherently at first, and not even in a consistently incoherent way like that.
Yeah.
Because 222 does do it very well. I'll give them that. But most other instances, you go, was this really your best method of communication? Because I'm sure you could have done it slightly more elegantly and less obtusely.
Yeah, no, true. Which in the case of this one, it's best case scenario, they're fairies. Worst case scenario is they're the ghosts of murdered little kids.
Yeah.
But they're very articulate for ghosts of little kids with those suicide notes. It's not something written in childish scrawl or something like that.
I mean, I think also the frustrating part for me is I would have preferred it if the note was written after she was taken.
Yeah.
Because it's doing it beforehand, and when he's got visions, you can't escape the whole. Surely this could have been expressed as a warning. Surely there was some way of tipping them off.
It was the interesting difference as far as you can tell, because it sounded like Kethy was a single mom. So she had the visions and she wrote the note.
Yeah.
But with the Lapierre family, the dad had the visions and she wrote the note.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work exactly the same anyway.
No, and it's one of those. You can't help but feel sympathy for Kethy because she has absolutely been convicted of a crime she didn't commit, as far as we understand.
And she's realised the fact that people will be more sympathetic if she actually admits to doing it, because otherwise she's got to sound like a lunatic.
Yeah.
And they might never let her out in that case.
And they're just glossing over the fact the body's in the wrong place. So apparently they did find the body, and that's...
No, they never said they found the body. They said it wasn't there.
They said it wasn't there, okay. Because I was about to say, is if it's in a different place, and you go say, so was it Santa Claus both times?
No, they just said the body wasn't where she said it was. They didn't say they found it.
Okay, that's okay then. And yes, seeing visions of a dead person does tend to maybe imply they're dead. Then again, elegy. But
elegy was people who were about to die.
Exactly. So Morse's assertion that you don't see ghosts until they're dead is contradicted by the X-Files itself.
Yeah.
Well done, Mulder. You've really been paying attention to the cases.
Mm.
Do you have anything else for this episode?
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah, okay. So next time, of course, we get the other half of this, which is closure, which we'll say nothing more about because we need to familiarise ourselves with this one because it's kind of infamous, but we'll try and give it the benefit of the doubt.
Got to admit, I don't remember this two-parter very well. It's when I saw the phrase about Santa Claus, I remembered where this one was going.
Yeah.
But I can't remember where it goes that well, so we'll have to see.
We'll have to see. We know, well, we've alluded to it, and Chris Carter is in the notes for Sein and Zeit that this is going to put a certain matter to rest, that of Samantha Mulder. And we can certainly confirm, based on seasons 8, 9, 10, and 11, that, yeah, she's not coming up again. Yeah. This is her out. No more Samantha Mulder whatsoever. Which is quite incredible, given this is like Mulder's motivating thing through the first 7.
True.
And there she's gone. And X-Cops, which, if you were like us in the 90s, an episode that made a lot of sense. Or 2000s, I suppose.
I think Cops was a big thing in America, but we didn't have it over here.
No.
So I do remember the first time I saw it, I had no idea what was going on.
I have a sneaking suspicion I had seen Troops, which is the Star Wars spoof, which people were very enthusiastic, because it is actually kind of a remarkable piece of special effects stuff they've done with it.
Yeah.
So I had that as the very broad outline of what Cops even was, to make sense of what on earth this episode was doing. But we're back to Monsters of the Week, and also quite funny, I think, X-Cops is.
Yeah, I remember it being tongue-in-cheek anyway.
Yeah. It could be a good antidote to closure, based on what we can remember of it. In the meantime, If you'd like to get hold of us, our email address is thingsargettingstrange42@gmail.com.
Alternatively, you can find us on social media, and please do let me know if you'd like us to promote any of your X-Files related stuffs at the start of this show. We are on Twitter and Tumblr at GetStrange42. We're on Mastodon at GetStrange42 at universidon.com. And we are on Facebook, where you can find us by searching for Things Are Getting Strange and X-Files Rewatch Podcast. Additionally, if you're not sick of my voice right now, I do have a channel on Twitch TV called AdverseCamber42, where I stream whatever I'm currently playing on the PlayStation 5. I'm live Mondays and Wednesdays at 8pm GMT and Saturdays at 5pm GMT, where I'm currently playing Woe and Fallen Dynasty. Although I do also ad hoc things on my off days sometimes, which I'll always let you know in advance on Twitter if I'm going to do. At the moment, in my ad hoc streams, I am playing Life is Strange True Colours, and if you are on the chat for that, I'll let you make the choices for me, so let that be an incentive.
We have Patreon, patreon.com/thingsargettingstrange, where you can find our Let's Play of the first X-Files game, where we die repeatedly, our attempted review of Mulder and Scully by Catatonia, which I think we managed 10 minutes worth. It's not easy. We're not good at doing pop music, so we tried. But also our review of Goblins by Charles Grant, which is the first of the adult novels that aren't novelizations, just straight up X-Files novels. And we discuss how weird it is.
Yeah, but you'll have to sign up to our Patreon if you want to find out why.
Yep, for little $3, all that can be yours.
It should be noted that we are going to keep reviewing the novel series as well, so if you do sign up to the Patreon, next month we will be adding our thoughts on Whirlwind by Charles Grant.
Woo! And then we have to move on to perennial Dune author Kevin J. Anderson, who's written more Dune books than Frank Herbert now.
Really?
Oh, he blew past that ages ago.
Oh, wow.
Frank Herbert managed 6. Kevin J. Anderson has written, along with Herbert's son, has written, I don't even know how many. There are
gosh.
Absolutely absurd number of Dune books at this point. Our theme music is envisioned by Kevin MacLeod. You can find it on Compotech.com, licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, please remember,
they live in the starlight.